Hello, and welcome to today's Control webinar, Expand and Modernize Your Records Program Without Adding Staff. Now for a few housekeeping items. Today's presentation will be recorded. This recording will be shared with you via email tomorrow. At the end of today's presentation, we'll show a list of upcoming complimentary webinars. If you or any of your colleagues are interested in joining future sessions, please visit us at contourl.com and select the Events tab to register. We'll also share white papers, blog posts, and articles we've recently published. We also invite you to complete our brief post-event survey. We truly value and appreciate your feedback. If you have any follow-up questions or comments, always feel free to reach out to us at info@contourl.com. And now allow me to introduce today's speaker, Mark Diamond, CEO and President of Contourl.
Thank you very much, Chloe. Mark Diamond with Contourl, and today we're going to talk about, I think this is a really challenging topic. We're going to address how do you expand your records program, either for just records and a large information governance program, when you're sort of limited on staff. What do you do and what works? And we're going to talk about a number of different tactics and strategies today. And I'll say this is, on one hand, I think this is challenging. I don't want to say it's an easy button to be able to do this. On the other hand, we have seen quite a few organizations that have tried these techniques very successfully, actually, for moving ahead with the program. And as always, for those of you who have been on before, you know this, or new attendees, that we're an independent provider. We're going to talk about products, different technologies. We don't sell any products. We don't store any documents. We don't do any reactive e-discovery, nor do we take any referral fees. And so everything I'm going to talk about today is really just that, which is our opinion on what we see works or does not work. All right, so I'm going to start out with some of the challenges. And by the way, I want to encourage everybody to post questions as I go through or work on this. But the first one is, a lot of organizations are feeling for records managing is facing flat or reduced headcount. Quite a few organizations. Sometimes it's like, no, you're not going to get an increase. And sometimes it's, well, we're actually going to reduce headcount. And that's part of a larger cost cutting that's been going on for the last 9 months. And it's actually more than just cost cutting. It's interesting. The pendulum is swinging. During the pandemic, there was employee hoarding. And now post-pandemic, organizations would hire people. It's going to say, well, if we don't, especially in the tech space, but many companies, well, if we don't hire them, somebody else will get them. And now the pendulum is swinging the other way, where Wall Street is really rewarding quite a few companies just for saying, hey, we're cutting headcount, even though there's not necessarily, a real need to be able to do that. But still, that's currently the fad. And the problem is that some senior management view records management purely as an expense, and hey, let's just go after that expense. And many records and information management programs really feel vulnerable. And maybe this is something you've already experienced. And so we sort of walk into this 2026, and maybe this will change if the Supreme Court rules on the tariffs, maybe not. And I could say this obviously applies more to just corporations. Many state and local public sector organizations, obviously they're facing some headcounts, and even nonprofits. So it's sort of being felt all the way around out there. Oops. Here's the other problem that we have, which is, at a time that we're being asked to sort of cut back on records management staffing, the needs and requirements are just getting bigger. If we look at the information governance needs out there, well, part of it is records management. How long do we keep things and get rid of stuff? But it's not just there. Obviously, there are increased privacy rules. There's a need to be able to manage intellectual property, other types of sensitive information, and those risks are just sort of, privacy is not going away, no matter if it's expanding, and the risks that we see around managing sensitive information are definitely not going away. They're also increasing. Organizations are taking a big look at their sharing controls. A lot of breaches happen when organizations overshare information. They don't restrict access to those that need. And as you know, some breaches are from bad actors, but a lot of breaches happen from internal. And to some extent, this is really a reflection of the sharing controls. And so that's not going away. Organizations tend to pile up more and more and more hoarding of documents, saving of data, especially electronic information, both paper, but especially electronic information. And that really hurts in terms of the world of e-discovery and legal holds. Litigation's not going away, and to some extent, if we have a more over retention of information, of unneeded information, that it just makes life more difficult. And then finally, the demands for employee productivity and collaboration, both from work from home employees, but also at work employees, and also business units are being asked to do more with less. We have to be able to do this, and we need to be more productive. I mean, sometimes it's sort of forced, saying we're going to cut you back, and we need you to do the same amount of work or more work with fewer staff. And so employee productivity and collaboration are even more important. And finally, we actually just did spoke at a virtual conference this morning with SCCE on this, the important need for AI governance. And if organizations want to use generative AI, there are so many of these drivers that feed into that, good records retention, disposition, privacy, so many components that feed into a successful AI governance strategy. And if your organization is saying, hey, we're going to embrace AI in 2026, or the process of doing that now, at the same time, we're sort of cutting back on records management, that puts us in a dilemma. So what do we need to do? So the strategy is we want to provide more value, save costs, and work smarter. And part of my thesis on this, which is sort of one of the theses I had last when we talked about records management program, but the thesis continues to be, let's go on the offensive to upgrade to an information governance program. We think that one of the keys is broaden the value of your program, broaden the appeal. Let's figure out where we can reduce cost. Let's make records function more self-managing, and perhaps most important, let's have a strategy that goes out and does all these things. I have a series of tactics, and I will give the caveat. You can do all the right things. You can follow exactly what we see in this webinar, and there's going to be no guarantee that it's going to work for you. That's just the nature of this. On the other hand, we've worked with quite a few organizations where we're working with really smart, stakeholders who have been smart, have strategized, and have been successful. So I wouldn't give it off. And even if it doesn't work today, hey, you're not getting more headcount. Maybe this can stave off the idea that records management is just an expense, but actually a valued part of the organization, and maybe maintaining what you have. But again, let's not just take it lying down. Let's not just let them do that. Let's do all we can do as information governance professionals to figure out how do we maintain or increase what we want to do in the world of information governance. So I'm going to go through these, and one of the areas I want to talk about is expand program return on investment. A lot of companies are looking at this. Well, I want to spend money to save money. If I spend this money, I'm going to save money. And some organizations are going through a process called zero cost budgeting, which is you have zero budget and you have to justify everything you do to increase it. And even if you're not going to zero cost budgeting, obviously ROI for senior executives is very important. We don't believe in having a single ROI for your program. We believe that there are 4 ROIs. The first one is storage reclamation. This is both electronic information and paper information, especially paper information. And this is typically touted as the biggest ROI for records management information governance. And I actually think it's the least. And not to say that there are not some good wins here, but the problem is, on the world of electronic information, a lot of organizations obviously go into cloud-based storage, and cloud-based storage generally tends to be less expensive than when organizations did on-prem storage. And so and sometimes organizations have so much over retention that their M365 bills are going through the roof. That does happen, but it's not always really strong. Now, in the world of paper, if you especially have offsite paper, we'll talk about this separately, we think there's a huge win for reducing your offsite paper. But don't. Our advice is, if you try to make a business case, an argument, don't pin it just on, hey, if we have a good records management program, we'll delete the stuff we don't need and we'll free up electronic storage space, and therefore that will justify the entire return. That gets to be a little bit tough. Now, the next ROI is e-discovery cost. And oftentimes organizations will go through, and we've seen this, where they go through a large litigation. They spent millions of dollars doing e-discovery. It was just a mess. And a lot of what they discovered was redundant, obsolete, or trivial information. They had stuff that shouldn't have been there. And if we didn't have that, and by the way, if it's not e-discovery, if you're in the public sector, it's public records request. We talk about, doing subject access requests for privacy. There's lots of times, these are all use cases within this ROI that can drive that. Here's the problem. When you're in the middle of the pain on this, everybody says we should do it. And unfortunately, when we sort of get done with it, we sort of, oh, that was so bad, I just don't want anything to do with that. And a lot of times hey, we're going to fix this when we get done with this, sort of goes by the wayside. Here's the other issue. And this is true for all of this, is we don't know what the litigation is going to be next year. We don't know if there's going to be large litigation or not. And sometimes, sometimes there's an inkling. Sometimes we see trends or regulatory inquiry, where there's a regulatory sweep. Sometimes you can sort of guess that, but sometimes not. And so if you want a hard and fast ROI, you can't do it. I don't know. If we have a lot of litigation next year, there's a tremendous ROI. If we have less litigation next year, maybe not. And so again, pinning this on just e-discovery costs, sometimes it'll be huge, but it's easy to say, well, maybe not. Well, we'll look at that next year. The next one is legal risk. And this could be either fines for personal information, for records rules. I mean, a whole bunch of regulatory risks. Effective information management underpins so much information, regulatory management, and poor information management or not up to speed information management can impact it. Here's the problem. We, like e-discovery, we don't know whether the fines are going to happen. In the world of privacy, I may get in a little trouble saying this. To some extent, oh my gosh, we got to do this. If you don't have this done in Minnesota, or you don't have this done in California, you're going to get huge fines. It's potential. Sometimes the fines happen, sometimes they don't. And again, if you're senior management addressing it, and these do happen, I don't want to say no, but again, do we know that if we don't do this, we're going to face fines? Well, no. And again, we ended this mode saying, oh, that. The fourth area I actually think is the strongest ROI, but it's the most difficult to measure, which is employee productivity. And I've talked about this before. On average, employees spend 6 hours per week in unorganized information environments. They can spend up to 6 hours per week looking for stuff, searching for stuff. This is not 6 hours at once. This is 5 minutes here, 2 minutes here, 3 minutes here. And think about, even today, did you spend time finding an organization which was probably not as easy to locate as it should be? And in more managed environments, the average is 3 hours. Actually, and if we could say 3 hours per week per employee, that's a huge ROI. I mean, if we look at all our employees and the average burden of employees, that's a very nice ROI. Here's the challenge, is this is difficult to measure. Some employees who are well organized, well, maybe we'll only save an hour per week. Very disorganized employees, maybe it's 8 or 9 hours per week. And so this ROI is a little bit squishy. And they're going to go, how do we really know, what's the hard data? And we can give averages on there, but the averages are going to vary out there. So how do we incorporate these ROIs? Well, the answer is we do all of them. We talk about the storage reclamation. We talk about the e-discovery risk. We talk about the legal and privacy risk. We talk about the employee productivity. We give all of these in terms of presenting an ROI. And we talk about ways we could save money. And it's true. Senior management may say, I don't think that compliance risk is really a big deal. Okay, but we still have 3 others to be able to work off of. And so again, a lot of times we always just think about, hey, let's just talk about reclamation, and it's much bigger than that. And let's put all these into the mix. But at the same time, when I talk to senior executives, I'll say, listen, let me be clear on this. We think the first one is real. We think the first two, the number 2 and number 3 definitely can happen. And number 4 is hard to manage, but very real. But in saying that, we actually add credibility to making the business case. So they go, oh, okay, I appreciate that. And they, again, your senior executives are smart. They know sometimes we got to do things that are hard to measure, or sometimes we should do stuff. And so this can often be effective. Probably the biggest thing. And so I want to focus now, not only how do we update our records program, but let's involve other stakeholders. If you're doing records management just under legal or just under a records group that works in facilities or even IT, and you're really working with your own group, that's quite frankly a huge miss for your organization. There are multiple groups that will benefit, that will see value in a larger information governance program. Not only in the legal side, obviously IT is a big winner of this, including InfoSec and data governance. Also privacy, audit, compliance, and risk. Obviously finance, business units, and HR. I mean, huge benefits to be able to do that. However, if you're thinking about your program just you, you're really missing out. You really need to early engage other stakeholders. You need to talk to them about, hey, let's have an expanded program that can do more. And I'll talk about what that means a little bit, but we definitely engage other stakeholders. We talk to a lot of organizations, and when if it's just 1 or 2 people to begin with, we go, let's we think you should be more successful. On the other hand, we're on there, legal's on there, and InfoSec is on there, and compliance is on there, and business units. We say, hey, this is a program that's going someplace because we have all the stakeholders. Now, I think we know this, but it's something we should really repeat to ourselves and practice quite a bit. When we want to engage another stakeholder in our expanded program, let's not just sell, hey, we're out of records compliance, or let's not talk about our needs, the stuff that we care about, or if we're in legal, hey, we're over, we have too much e-discovery cost. And this may be a little bit strong, but they don't really care about that. I mean, they've got their own problems they need to worry about. Now, the good news is a better information governance program are huge wins for these groups. IT, reduce storage costs, leverage existing technology, reduce e-discovery efforts. IT hates e-discovery. For privacy, better personal information protection, better data minimization, easier subject access request. We talked about this, the business units, increase employee productivity and better collaboration. Huge win. You're not there. We're not there to hurt. We're not to take stuff away. We are there to make you more productive and collaborative and really getting that message out. If you're doing AI, we'll talk about this. Huge data quality to feed into RAG, or reduce sensitive data leakage and higher compliance. Or InfoSec, we're dealing with, InfoSec is much more active. We're dealing with a number of our stakeholders are InfoSec. Reduces the risk of breaches, automates classification, eliminates rogue repositories. And finally, meet regulatory requirements or demonstrate, policies being followed. And I think compliance is usually a soft sell because they believe in this stuff already. But the point is, nowhere do I want to say, hey, I want you to join forces. I want you to support this because it helps me out. Rather, let me help you out. And I have this conversation with legal a lot of times. They were, well, if we go to the business units and sell their wins, are we not going to get the limiting the over retention or the lowered cost of e-discovery? Absolutely not. Just because we sell the program, if you will, on these benefits or attributes, that by no means means that what we want, just being selfish from an information governance perspective, we won't also get. This is neither an either or. We get all of these. I had one client that she tried to sell a records program, and quite frankly, nobody was really interested. She then said, hey, this is an employee productivity in program, because she was right. She said, we're not doing good collaboration. A big part of collaboration is employee productivity. So she went back to all the stakeholders, and it turned out that employee productivity was really one of the CEO's themes for that year. When it was cast as a employee productivity, everybody got on board. And so, and I'll just have this other side comment. There may be some of you listening saying, why do I have to sell it for somebody else? Why do I have to sell it all? How come senior management just doesn't see the benefit of this? And I'm sort of sympathetic with that, but I'll also say is that as a senior manager, you have all of these requests coming in from all these groups, and you quite frankly don't have resources for all of them. And it's not that they're dumb or they don't care about you. It's just that they've got to make tough choices. And what we want to do is make it easier for them to make the tough choices. And let's not pout the fact that we have to do this. Let's be smart. Let's work aggressively. By the way, I'm looking at the questions. If you have questions, be able to do that. All right. So how do we increase the value of the program? And by the way, I'm going to translate increasing the value into the cost and the staffing part of it in a bit. You get me on my soapbox. If you've heard us before at Contoro, we're a big believer in having a modern records retention schedule, comprehensive, targets company-specific records, legal regulatory requirements, and business and value. We address personal information. It's defensible, and it's a huge benefit to generative AI. To get more engagement, to potentially get more resources or even work more efficiently, we have to have a modern program, and underpinning that modern program is a modern records retention schedule. We've had some other webinars on this. You can go access to those, but I think this is a huge component of it. Now, once we have the records program, let's talk a little bit about the cost savings. And don't rent your records retention schedule, own it. There are two ways to do a records retention schedule. You can buy an out-of-the-box records retention schedule. One vendor says I can do this in minutes. Other vendors will do that. And sometimes these are expensive. I mean, we're talking $50, $75, $25, $50, $75, $100,000 or more per year because it's a subscription. They're more difficult to automate. They're difficult to customize. Even if you get them, and a whole nother discussion, you still have to go look at all the citations. We find lots of this. We have clients that use these programs, and we find lots of mistakes in the citations. And as I said, it requires an ongoing subscription. So one way you can probably save a lot of money is by owning your own schedule. If you hire a consultant, for example, to create a schedule that you can own, it's much easier to automate, and this will become more important in a bit. Easier to integrate with privacy discovery, so we engage other stakeholders. Easier to follow and less expensive. It just is, and actually, it's a better schedule. It's just a better schedule than some of the stuff you get from off the shelf. But I don't know. For some reason, we see this rent a schedule as a core component of it. And to be honest, I think a lot of times you're wasting a lot of money. You can get something better, more effective for less money that you can own, and people can come back and update it. You hire a consultant to come up and update it, than trying to rent it out there. And so definitely an area you should look at. And obviously part of the strategy is let's figure out where we can save money, and that may free up more money for other resources. And this is a huge area where we can save money. Now, I alluded to this earlier, and I want to show with a good records management schedule that identifies business value, this is a huge play into generative AI. And I'll talk a little bit about this. Again, we have a whole other webinars on this, but if you're using generative AI and using ChatGPT, you're probably using training data by OpenAI. And this is OpenAI goes out in the web and vacuums up all the data and turns that into training tokenized data sets. The problem is that data isn't really good sometimes. You may have better data, either scientific. If you're life sciences, you have better scientific data. If you're working on this for manufacturing or financial services or engineering, you have much better data. You don't have to use the off-the-shelf data. And so one of the areas that is really coming to fore in generative AI is something called retrieval augmented generation. I want to use a large language model, but I want to use our high quality data and not your low quality data. Let me give you a very simple use case. Some of you may be using generative AI to generate contracts. Well, do you just want to use like off-the-shelf contracts that that everybody have used, or hey, let's give them our contracts that we can use. We'll feed the large language model and build me a contract based on what you see for my contracts. However, how do we make sure that we're giving them the contracts with our contracts with the terms we don't like? How do we make sure that we're not using old contracts that we're using different terms? How do we make sure how do we make sure that we're not inadvertently feeding it contracts that may have sensitive information or personal information? And how do we make sure that we have appropriate data classification on that? We're not inadvertently doing that. These are records management issues. And so this whole data quality, which is becoming a huge issue in generative AI, really is fundamental to a records management program and a good modern records management program. So if your senior management says, hey, we want to do AI this year, love it. But to do generative AI and to be successful and to be competitive, we need to boost our records management program to a smarter program. That's a different argument. That's a much more successful argument than, again, being in a silo for just records management. So really look at that. If you should be all over the AI and the data quality issue. It's a huge driver for your records management. All right, so let's get to the next crux of the issue, which is how do we resonate to the business units? Because the business units are very influential in what gets funded or what doesn't get funded. So sometimes the records management is feared as driving a lot of pain, or all they want to do is take stuff away. And I don't think we should fund records management because we don't care about this. Here's the issue. If you have unorganized data, your employees are suffering. If we want to go clean stuff up, we will make them more productive, because what we want to do is sort out the high value information from the low value information. If your records group is viewed, or information governance group is you're not liked because people say, all you're here to delete this stuff, you've got to remessage that. You have to be smarter about that. And I give this an analogy of a garage. This is not my garage, because I was told I was not allowed to use a picture of my garage, but we have a very cluttered garage, and this actually happened to me. I talked about this in the past. I bought a Christmas tree stand because I was, being the very helpful husband that I am. And my wife is like, we already have a Christmas tree stand in the garage. Oh, we do? I didn't know that. Well, it turns out we did, but we had so much clutter in the garage, we couldn't find anything. Your information management is the same way. You are such a boon to a good program to finding the valuable information, classifying it, making it accessible, and getting rid of all the clutter. And again, you want business units to sort of be a cheerleader of what you're doing. That can have a tremendous impact on how you're funding and being able to do that. This is a huge driver. And again, traditional records management, they look at them as the deletion police. And no. Yes, but we're still going to want to get rid of lots of stuff. There's lots of stuff don't get me wrong about that. But we're not taking pleasure in deleting stuff for deleting stuff's sake. We're taking pleasure in finding the valuable stuff and getting rid of the clutter. And so again, how you position this is that. But when we present to senior management, we do assessments. We'll go in and we'll say, hey, this is what we heard from your employees. So, and sometimes, well, their employees aren't going to like it. Well, actually, we think they will, because we have these, and likewise, when we reintroduce the upgraded program to the employees, they're going to go, oh, we heard you. We heard all these pains. We want to solve your pains. We're listening to you. That's why we want to do this. Versus, we're going to go out and delete 70% of your stuff. So let's be smart about that. And I alluded this previously. This is in the ROI slide. Really, the 3 hours per week. And again, this is going to vary, and it's going to vary across organizations. And I get in a little bit of trouble using this as a singular statistic, and that's valid criticism, because some employees it's going to be less, some it's going to be more, and it's going to go across organizations. But it's still true. We still have a lot of employees that waste a lot of time, and it's not 3 hours at once or 6 hours at once. it's 5 minutes here and 10 minutes here, and it's throughout the day. You can't really find stuff. And again, this should be job one. And again, if we can then turn that into an ROI, that makes a very powerful ROI. Now, the challenge is when we do this, how do we make ourselves credible? How are you really going to do this? And I'll answer that in a little bit. But don't be bashful about saying, hey, we want to be smarter about this. All right. So another area I want to talk about is consider merging records and privacy functions. Why is that? What does privacy do? Privacy identifies personal information, and it makes sure it's secure and protected. And it makes it accessible, because if we have to do a subject access request, if somebody says, hey, what personal information do you have? And then obviously at the right time, we need to delete it. What does records management do? Well, we identify records. We classify them. We save them. We save them for a period of time. We make them accessible. We allow people to get those back to use them, and then we get rid of them when we're done. Now, different drivers, but it's really the same thing. And we've seen organizations get a pretty good economy of scale by combining the privacy and the records program together. Now, there's, this is sometimes, a political issue, and the records are folks are like, oh, we have to be with the privacy folks, and the privacy people are like, oh, we got to be with the records folks. No, I can assure you, we have a number of clients that have done that, and the records folks are happier now, and the privacy folks too, in the new entity. Why? Well, because they essentially get more resources. They're leveraging the same work streams. They're being smart about this. We have, one corpus of data. We have all this unstructured data and structured data and paper documents. It's not like we have one set of data for privacy, one set for records. They're all the same. So why not put together common work streams? And so minimally, if you can't combine the organizations, at least let's work together and find common initiatives and do projects together. And by the way, it's not just privacy, it's e-discovery, it's information security, it's all the different stakeholders we had before. This is just one step more, being able to do that. And this is increasingly happen out there where privacy is taking this over. So think about that and consider that. I'm feeling a little lonely. I don't have a lot of questions out there, so make sure call me if something's not clear or you want to do. Okay. One probably very important, probably the most important to get buy-in to a smarter program is how doable is it? And because traditional records management processes aren't very doable. I want you to move it over here, and I want you to enter the metadata, or I want you to go in and do drop-down boxes, multiple drop-down menus to classify this for retention, or maybe I got to look at the schedule. And your stakeholders say, yeah, that's not going to happen. We're not going to settle. We've been talking about doing this for years. It's not going to happen. And so we are big believers in implementing the 5-second rule. And again, this is a completely different webinar that we talk about, but this is basically taking your repositories like Microsoft 365 or G Suite or other repositories and teaching them all of the rules. And then once they have the rules, all we do is drag and drop and put the documents there, and all of the classification, the tagging, the access controls, e-discovery is all handled within the repositories. Now, the old method doesn't seem doable, but this whole, what we call the data placement and automation strategy, actually feels very doable. And at least when we engage, senior management or stakeholders, we walk through this, because they're in the back of their mind, they're going, oh, is this going to be where we have to make all the employees jump through all these hoops and do all these processes that they probably, no, actually, we got a very easy way using the technology and tools we already have today. That's a huge component of it. And so really think about how we drag and drop stuff and move stuff over there to make that accessible. So that's but again, to address this whole funding issue, and we have to have a credible. The other part of this, and this is very subtle but very important, we are going towards a much more of a self-serving model. Employees are doing this, and the better we get employees to do this, the more we're going to be able to to have less burden on us as a records management group to be able to do this. So this is very important. Okay, I finally got some good questions. Oh, not fine. Thank you. Do I have any thoughts using tools like Purview to assist with records management? And Brandon, thank you, and that's a great question. I'll give you my short answer, and if you want to follow up with me afterwards. We believe that, I'm going to assume that by Purview you mean automated classifiers. Automated classifiers and other machine learning type of tools, DLP tools, other things like that, are really good at finding certain types of information, personal information, stuff with regular expressions, other things like that. They are not good in the larger world of records. There's a lot of records that very much defy automated classification with machine learning. Now, this will change with generative AI classification, and that's, later in the year, you'll hear from us on that. This is a really big driver associated with that. And so, not to say these tools aren't useful, but don't think that I can use, Purview or assisted automated classifiers within that to do everything. The other thing, and here's a cost-saving thing, is if you're using Microsoft 365, you do not need to be on, everybody does not need to be on E5. Microsoft loves to tell everybody, oh, if you want to do records management, you have to be on E5. No, we have very large, complex global organizations that are extremely successful using the less expensive, almost standard E3 version of this. And so we don't really need that. Now, a few people typically do that, but not all the masses. And that's a very nice cost saving that we can be able to do. So, but in answer though, yes, automated classifiers, machine learning, DLP is useful for some information, but it doesn't address, you need something like a data placement strategy to address all of the records, not just, because it's not as successful to do all this. A comment from Sarah: I proposed this method for email management on my organization. The CTO said, don't organize my email that way. I'd be difficult to move all an existing folder structure. I agree with this. By the way, everybody's bringing up great topics here that we can do entire webinars on. And so I'm going to struggle to answer this briefly, but that's a tremendous question. When it comes to classifying email, some email are records. We can declare there are no records in email, and we'll be wrong, and we'll be in trouble for that later. There are some records on email. We like to break email into a go forward strategy and a legacy strategy. Go forward, we can start doing this drag and drop for emails. And by the way, you also can classify emails within people's email box. And so there's rules we can play both at the Outlook level and also at this data placement strategy to be able to do that. Legacy email is trickier. And so one of the things we're seeing companies doing, there are some things you can do on legacy email, but the idea that everybody's going to go back and sort through 10 years worth of email ain't going to happen. This is where generative AI is going to come in, and it's going to become very, very interesting. So just do it. And by the way, setting up this data placement strategy puts you in a great place. And very soon, generative AI is going to be able to help us in a compliant and defensible way to be able to do that. So let's get it set up, and we'll sort of address the legacy email, but at least we'll get the go forward stuff to be able to do that. So that was one question. We have a comment from Anne. Data governance is also the same drivers as privacy and records. Yes, that is very true. Do you recommend they be under the same umbrella? Well, and I thank you, Anne, for pointing out. I probably misspoke on that, because data governance should be a huge component. Now, data governance is a little different than information governance. We have a webinar on this too. Like I said, you're all coming up with great topics. Data governance tends to be more focused on structured data, master data management, and how do we wring information or wring value from the data that we have. Information governance tends to be more on employee productivity, but there's a lot of overlay on those two, and good information governance can absolutely help data governance. So I think that's a great point that you had there for that. I think I've got all these. Oh, here we got another question. Do you think the argument is valid? And this is from Carolyn. Do you think the argument is valid that each function separately, records, privacy, data management, even IT in some area, isn't mature enough to work together jointly as IG? Pushback for IG that we're not ready. Well, good question. Are you not ready because you're not ready, or by saying as siloed organizations, are you preventing yourself from being ready? No. To be mature, we have to work together. I'm going to recommend, and I'll talk about this, let's present the big picture view on what this looks like and how we can work together. And yeah, we may do this in pieces. And it's not like in day one, we're all going to come together in the same department. I'm not recommending that. Privacy and records may come together, other things like that. But I think that's a somewhat self-fulfilling prophecy. And to some extent, you need to message up high enough in the organization, because if you do it too low down level, we get the territorialism. But if you start talking to senior management, they begin to, the light bulb begins to come on. But no, let's not let that prevent us from being smart. Let's be smarter about that. Thank you for all those questions, everybody. All right. Well, actually, I just touched on this. I'm narrating my own points. Upgrade your program over a longer period of time. Sometimes we're going to update the policies. We're going to get the email. We're going to get the files. We'll hit the paper. We'll make e-discovery better. All these things that happen. But let's not get overwhelmed. Sometimes we have to do these in a stepwise approach. That's okay. You're not failing if we don't do everything by the end of the year. No, we have clients that take a year, 2 years. We have one client that's been working on this 5 years very successfully. Why 5 years? Well, they're big and complex, and that's the pace that they can work at. But at least they're on the track to be able to do this. And if you go to your senior management and say, by the way, this is not a 1 year project. This is a 3 year project or a 4 year project. It's possible and likely that they'll go, oh, okay. And likewise, we don't have to pay for everything at once. Again, we're looking for cost savings. We're looking to get joint ownership with other groups. We're looking to work smarter. We're looking for efficiencies. And those are the arguments we make, but we'll do this. Now, when we do this roadmap, let's find the quick wins. Let's not say, hey, it's going to be a year on the foundational stuff, and only after that year can we go out and do something. No, let's get some quick wins early. Let's see some business benefits early. Let's build that into our roadmap, attack those pain points, and then we can go through. And so, but again, how you present this and saying, hey, you realize, and the other thing is, some of you may be going, if I show this chart to my senior management, I'm going to scare them. Maybe, probably not. I'm guessing that they probably intuited that this is probably more complex than a simple project. And don't try and fool them. Be honest, because they know that already. And matter of fact, if you're honest, oh, okay, you're probably going to be one step closer to getting them to buy off on your strategy. Okay, I have another question. How about the intersection of information security and data governance as well? Absolutely. And I mentioned that we're dealing with none of our sponsors are information security folks. And to some extent, a good strategy may have a sponsor, but not a single stakeholder. We want to, as I talked about earlier, let's engage all these stakeholders. Let's get them all involved. Let's let them see the win. In some cases, we can get other parts of our project funded by these other groups. We see that in legal. Legal, a lot of times will start this out, but they very much want us to engage all the other stakeholders so we can get other funding as part of that. And or even better yet, if we as a senior management team can go, a whole group of us stakeholders, us as a team goes to senior management as a team is what I meant to say. We've even seen senior management do, funding not out of your department or out of my department, but an incremental funding to be able to do this. You might be surprised. And so again, if they get what we're trying to do and it makes sense. All right. Where's another, by the way, I love the questions. Thank you, everybody. Another area we have is how do we do more with less records management resources? And if you don't already have this now, really think about doing this as an information governance champion or a records coordinator. A lot of our clients want to nominate people within the business unit, sort of super users, if you will, that get extra training that serve as, answer resources within their business unit. And this is not a new job or a full-time job. This is somebody whose existing job and a little bit more time per month to be able to do that. And we embed and they still report into the business function, but these are embedded in all the business units. The more we can take the day-to-day burden off of records management and move it into the business units, that's huge. Now, why would the business units want to do this? You may be asking. Are they going to say, oh, you're just trying to pawn off records management responsibilities on the business function. Well, if you're at that point, you've made a misstep a little bit earlier. Remember, we're about productivity and collaboration. We're about getting people together. And so the more we can do this with show the benefit to them, we've seen a lot of them that like this idea. And obviously, if they can pull more of the day-to-day stuff, that can free up resources so we can, again, do more with less. We don't necessarily need more headcount. Again, I'm going to go back to a lot of records group. You have a rented schedule. You're very paper-centric. You have a lot of manual processes. It takes a big team to be able to manage that. And so the idea of expanding that doesn't really, doesn't seem realistic. But if we can redesign, rethink how we do this and how we approach it, and we engage other people, and we do this as a cross-functional steering committee, and we get more efficient about it, it's a different landscape. It really is. So a big believer in that. Now, speaking of paper records, huge cost savings. Organizations like Iron Mountain and Access make an awful lot of money by taking your paper and making it very hard to get rid of. They sometimes charge hostage fees to be able to do this. And it's interesting. If you go look at your offsite paper, I'd be willing to bet that 90% of what you're storing in offsite paper was sourced electronically originally. And as we know, there's a very, very small percentage of documents that need to be stored in paper. They really need to be stored electronically. Electronic is fine. So why are we taking electronic information, putting it in storage, and month after month after month, the fees go up? And even if the fees go up, you're really, then they charge you in other ways. Was it Iron Mountain that had if you call them for a question on an account, they want to charge you $25. It's crazy. It's crazy. We're working with some companies as we speak, helping them renegotiate their Iron Mountain or potentially getting out of some other vendor contracts and access and other things like that with some organizations. Again, it's easy. I'm going to be not nice here. Easy to be lazy and I'll just get it off to Iron Mountain and I'm done. We have to attack it. We have to remediate the paper on site, make sure that we're only storing what we need to, figure out which of this stuff maybe we want to image and put in store electronically, what are the stuff that we can delete, and maybe there's a very small percentage because we only have to keep it a little bit longer that we want to save in paper. And then how do we make sure that we're not adding new paper, that we break these old habits? Because this is a nice pile of money that we should not be spending, that if we're smart, we need to be able to do that. And it's a little tricky. Sometimes they want to charge you a lot of money to get out of it. They give you an expense saying, we can get out of it, it's going to cost more money. And it's like, well, that's more money we're going to pay in a year, so maybe we'll just let it ride this year or let it ride the next year. Again, we have an entirely new webinar on this, a different webinar on this, but a good area that you should be able to look at. Okay, a comment from Sarah. Hostage fees, I never heard that before, using that. Yes, it is hostage fees. They're smart. They have a business model and they're trying to optimize their business model. All right. This is a very important part. What kind of person do you want to hire? If you're a senior manager and you're looking to maybe expand this information governance program, do you need a program builder or do you need a program maintainer? And I'm going to argue, and by the way, we talked about this last month at our webinar, how to hire for information governance. But I'm going to repeat myself. The builder is there for a limited amount of time. They like to be in cutting edge. They're going to be more expensive and they lack patience. We've actually seen a lot more success with program maintainers. These are people that prefers managing over a building, lower salaries, easier to source candidates, somebody that's going to be there. And being slightly self-serving, but very true. Our company saved money, our clients save money by hiring somebody like us at Contoro to come in and build their program. We get it, we do it once, we do it quickly, we do it efficiently, we do it cost effectively, and then engage the maintainer to be able to do that. And so we see this as a very good model for a lot of organizations for putting in the builder component of it. So that works for them. By the way, thank you for all these great questions here. What are some of the, Kim Wright, Kimberly writes, what are some of the ways to make an IG champion coordinator program work? We've tried different versions of the approach and have tried to get C-level support, but it's never worked. Appointed staff are typically overworked administrative staff who don't have the time and interest to make the records program. It's hard to me to comment on why it did or did not work for your organization, but I'll just make these comments. We really want to center the coordinator or the champion or whatever we want to call it. And by the way, I don't really care what we call it, although we want to make it sound useful, as really a productivity boon for the organization. We got lots of stuff. We're going to make it easier for you to find. And here's a person to be able to help you be able to do that. And by the way, we're going to do these other things. And so a lot of it's positioning. And again, if we can engage the business units earlier in the process, they're more likely to be able to do that. Now, if you're through your process, how do we do that? You're happy to call them and strategize in your specific situation. But again, positioning and messaging and communication. This is not and to some extent, I don't like the records coordinator role because that sounds like it helps me in records management. How can I call it so it help you? A productivity assist or something like that helps the business unit to be able to do that. I will say this: we have quite a few of our clients that have implemented the coordinator roles, and again, initially that we'd gone on day one saying, "Hey, business unit, why don't you staff this person?" And it's going to be 10 hours a month. They would have been like, "No way." But once walking through, they go, "Oh, okay, I get it," and now it's been more successful. So the other thing you may want to think about is engage fractional staff. Again, slightly self-serving for us. You don't necessarily need a full-time employees. We have a number of clients that engage us on a fractional basis. We have people that work for a quarter time or half time. This has two advantages. First of all, you may not need a full-time person to be able to do this. Again, as you get smarter, maybe you need somebody on a half-time basis or quarter-time basis, or maybe it starts out on larger and then and ratchets back after a while. The other thing is, and this is the strange economic laws of corporations, sometimes it's just easier to get a fractional resource than a fully burdened headcount. That's what happens too. And so we're working actually with quite a few clients providing a fractional person, for less cost, half-time, quarter time, and it's and then it takes away the need to be able to do that. And at some point, we may transition that into a full-time permanent employee for them. That's fine. But in the meantime, this is sometimes a very good way of doing it. And again, it shows that we're being conscious about this to say, hey, we don't think we need a whole full-time person, but a part-time person can work pretty well. All right, I want to make sure I answered all the different questions. I just want to summarize. When we talk about information governance, and again, it's hard, and a lot of organizations are feeling, the cold winds of financial change blowing in their way. Don't sort of just hunker down and do nothing. Now's the time actually to work harder, to work smarter, to think out of the, be cliche, think out of the box, engage other stakeholders, think about how we can modernize, think about where we can save money, think about how we can automate, think about how we can make it more self-managing for the employees, where we can reduce costs in other areas or find pockets of money. These are all areas to do this. And as I said at the beginning, even if you do all these things, I won't guarantee it's going to work. You may still face headwinds. Now, in some places it does work. In other places it hasn't worked, but it hasn't worked yet. And so I would encourage you to think about this, because even if it doesn't work this year, even if they're going, hey, we got to do this, sorry, we didn't get your funding request, or now we're going to cut you back, you're at least changing the conversation. You're changing the perception. You're trying to get out of this, oh, we just spend money in records management and we don't get anything from it. I'm being unfair. I know this is not true, but I'm talking about perceptions. Being unfair, it's therefore we can cut the cost, to, hey, actually, this is pretty helpful for a lot of things what we do. How do we preserve it? So we can help with that at Control. We do assessments. We do assessment, and roadmap is a really good way of mapping this out and figuring out where we want to go and what we want to do. This is a big part of it. We do records management schedules. We do more of these. We do the data placement strategies. The other thing I want to suggest, we've been doing a lot of this. Virtual in-house governance seminar. I can do a virtual seminar for your organization. Get all your key stakeholders together. We talked about all the stakeholders. As a matter of fact, I've even done this for the senior leadership team that have been part of this. Why information governance? What do we do? How does that help us? What are our peers doing? Other things like that. Very high reviews on this. This is not a sales pitch for us at Control. Matter of fact, you'll hear me repeat some of the same things I talked about here. A little different format, but some of the same things I've talked about here. And it's virtual, so it's not hard we don't charge you for it. Matter of fact, we can even offer continuing legal education credit for this, although more than just the legal department should be part of this. I did one last quarter for a legal department of 110 people. It's a really good session, but we've done this for large and small organizations. Reach out to us at Contoro. We're happy to be able to do this. And this, we talked about engaging. This is a great initial step for engaging stakeholders. Hey, we've got this. I'm going to be modest here. We got this, nationally recognized thought leader, Mark Diamond, come to talk to us. We'd like you. We think you'll have and we'll help you figure out how to market it. But let us know if you're interested in one of those. I have another question here. We have 50,000 hard copy boxes of records in storage that has never been an app to digitize, and you don't necessarily need to digitize all of them. First of all, if they're expired, you don't. And second of all, if they're short-term retention, we don't. Only if they're long-term retention, but equally important to digitize them is know where to put them when we do digitize them, because we don't want to go from a pile of paper records to a pile of digital records that aren't organized. Senior managers never been an appetite because senior management's well aware the majority is rot and would rather just pay the monthly bill. Yeah, no, we can. You can put when it comes to get rid of stuff, you can put together a very repeatable process that defensively gets rid of stuff and negotiate. We can help you negotiate with your vendor so they don't charge the hostage fees to be able to do. It's a huge undertaking. It isn't. I mean, you need an up-to-date records retention schedule to be able to do that. And then you need to define a repeatable process. But when we help our clients do that, and we've helped them clear out entire warehouses of paper documents, sometimes they then hire very cheap resources that just sort of, follow the checklist and document the right stuff. They don't have to be expensive resources. We're happy to do this. This is very doable. So I think there is per your question, Kelly, I think there is an easier way to, you may be making it more complicated than you think. The big thing is how do we negotiate with the vendors on this and how do we make something that works? We have a webinar on a records retention schedule coming up. This is an oldie but goodie, and we'll update that for 2025. That's coming up next month. And we've got a really good webinar coming up in March on how to create a personal data inventory using not a third-party product that's real expensive, but using Microsoft 365. That's a really cool thing that we've started doing. We have white papers and feature articles we're happy to be able to share with you. Developing data retention policy. We've got some feature articles on our website. Lots of additional content, all freely available at Control.com. Go take a look at it. And as you can tell, I've clearly glossed over a number of issues here. In the sake of brevity, but we have or for the sake of brevity, but we have a lot of good information out there. The other thing that we're doing, if you're a Contoro client, you already know about it. We have something called an Information Governance Peer Exchange. It's funny, we like to get our clients together. We do it by industry, and we have quite a few, and we just let them talk among themselves. We'll organize it, we'll be hosts. We don't say anything, we just and so often we get our clients just want to talk to their peers. Hey, what are you doing about this? Or how about that? Very valuable information. And so this is generally for Contoro clients, but if you'd like to participate in one and talk to peers, let us know. We do invite guests on there. Again, we're looking for good people that want to contribute and part of the exchange. And so let us know. We do this on a quarterly basis to be able to do that. All right, I think that's all the questions I have. And just actually, I'm exactly out of time too. Well, hey, thank you for your great questions. We appreciate you attending our webinars. We have a whole slate of webinars coming in 2026. We're delighted to be able to provide that. We wish you success. It can be tough, but if you work smart and you work well, you just might be surprised about how you can not only maintain but expand what your program does with information governance. Good luck.
Thank you again to Mark for today's interactive and informative webinar, and thank you for joining us. We hope you enjoyed the webinar, and we look forward to seeing you on our next one on February 12th, creating a modern, compliant, and easier to execute records retention schedule. Thank you.